All right, welcome to the post-premiere discussion. Please turn on your video, all of you, so we can see you. Hey, Anton, great to see you.
Anton.
Down, right? So William has his video on. That's good. Everybody else, just kind of turn your video on just for now, before I mute you all and only get to the dedicated followers. Oh, Bill, hello, Bill. There's Bill Halal from Washington, D.C. Great to see you. Great to see everybody here. And of course, Arlene and Andreas from Basel. Hello, everybody. So the film is just now wrapping up with the end of the trailer. This conversation is being live streamed on YouTube as well. And that means you can say what you want, but it'll be live on YouTube and recorded and everything. And so we want to know how you like the film, what your thoughts are on the topic. Before we do that, I want to introduce Chris Nolan. You guys know, most of you know me personally or otherwise. Chris Nolan is the director of the film. I'm going to spotlight Chris here. So there he is. And he is in Santa Monica. And so just suffering through a bunch of storms and earthquakes, you know, nothing major, just a combination of those things. So just say hello, and Chris, and tell us.
Yeah, nice to meet you all. And thanks for watching the movie. And we're excited to show it to you today. I think it's very important. I'll talk about how amazing Gerd was. As Gerd said, how quickly we had to do this and how fast we had to put this together. But yeah, I'm anxious to talk to you and hear your comments and what you thought of the film.
Great. So what we're going to do is basically go through the raised hands. If you want to speak, you have to raise your hand. It's at the bottom of the Zoom software. There's a raise hand thing, right? There's also reactions that you can use. So if you're disgusted or excited, you can use the reaction button. There's a chat box underneath. So please do type all of your chats in here. There's more people coming in. I will let everybody in as we're proceeding. There's a maximum of 100 on this show, so sorry about that. Let's get the first question. Does anybody have a question or a comment? Please raise your hand, and then we'll just go to you and put you on video for everybody. Okay, don't be shy. Yeah. Okay, William, there you are. Bill, let's put you in here.
I can just say the obvious. This is another one of your really positive interpretations of powerful events. Gerd, great job, beautifully done. Everything, the video, the data, the positive interpretation, very well done. Thank you.
Thank you. And do you have any feedback on the content and the message behind it? What are your thoughts on that?
I just wonder if we're going to be able to do get the control that you envision. That's the real challenge, I think, getting people to work on this.
Hey, what do you think of the International Artificial Intelligence Agency concept that is actually being tackled by the UN, including the Millennium Project that we both work with and others? And this is, by the way, how we know each other, through the Millennium Project and the World Future Society. So Bill is involved with that as well, but do you think there's a real chance that we can actually do this?
Well, the UN has a lot of baggage. I just wonder if that's the place for this. Maybe a private sector organization. But other people probably have opinions about this.
Yeah, let's hear from everybody else what you're thinking about, the solution to how we can make this a good future. And the film obviously tries to be a little bit balanced about those opinions, even though sometimes I have the same nightmares about that not working out. But anybody want to comment or ask another question? Please raise your hand or just unmute yourself and speak. Don't be shy. There's only 5 million people watching. I'm just kidding. 5 million AIs are watching. Oh, Anton. Okay, there you go. Why don't you come on in? You have to unmute yourself.
There you go. Good. I think the complexity of this is astounding. I think the comment about the UN being full of baggage is absolutely spot on. And so I think the only way to mobilize the thinkers in the world that can make this real is to start being upfront in painting a picture of what the destination might look like. So what is that that future that we see when we look up over the ramparts? And let's start getting a bit specific about it to create a story that gives people goosebumps, so that they can then mobilize around outside of all the existing baggage-filled structures.
That's exactly. I think that, I was going to say, Gerd, the part of this film is a series. Well, this series is a series that we're creating called Rebranding the Future. And Anton, you really hit on it. We attempted to create a storyline. Yeah. Right. Gerd in the future, coming back. I think it was Peter Leiden so we were talking about creating more stories along these lines. And that's really what this was just an attempt to get the discussion going about, can we start a conversation, right? Are there some solutions? Yes. But to your point, the thing that get mass audiences involved in this is more storytelling.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, we got the facts out there, but people don't gravitate to PowerPoints, not to just facts. They need the stories.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that we were looking at while we were shooting the film is that to create a good narrative about the future, that's a really big mission. Chris wrote about this 6 weeks ago, and Anton, who's a good colleague of mine in Cape Town, South Africa, we talk about this a lot. How do we get the future not to be considered as shitty or perpetually bad, or how do we tell a different story? How do we rebrand the future like people rebranded New York City, right? Make basically said the future is not going to be bad just because we have bad things now. We have more capacity to solve them, as Kevin Kelly says. This is a major topic in my speeches, because I meet a lot of people who are saying, oh, Gerd, you're dreaming. The good future, there's no such thing. Climate change and Putin and China and, and I don't know what you're smoking, but there's no good future. And this film is, I think it's important as a stepping stone towards how we can create that. Yeah, Chris.
Exactly. I want to pose a question to people, though. The hard part from a storytelling standpoint in creating protopian concepts is that they're always seen as Pollyanna. And the trick is you have to show a little bit of dystopia that comes out as protopia, which is what we achieved. We started to achieve with this movie. It was we're just scratching the surface. But that's the hard part. When anybody looks at how do we create positive stories, that's why there's very few white mirrors and more black mirrors, because people respond to negativity. We're kind of evolutionarily geared to do that. And so once we see stuff that's like hopeful and optimistic, there's a part of our brain that goes, I don't believe it. I'm skeptical, I'm cynical.
I thought the positive applications were very, very encouraging. That's something that's lacking. You don't hear that.
Yeah.
That was well done.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Bill. That's great. We're looking forward to it. It's one of the things we wanted to achieve.
Well, I think one of the key challenges in the film, and also for this, and pretty much all along my work as a futurist, has been that we're like, overcrowded with older white guys. And it's hard to branch out and bring in the world. I've tried that with the Good Future Project. Young people, women, minorities from Africa and Asia. It's a really hard undertaking. If you look around in future organizations, most of people that do future work are kind of men my age, and that's becoming a real drawback as well, because our perspective just isn't enough. And I think this is something that we have to break through, to really find the good future as well, because the good future is very likely to be made by the younger, by the millennials, most likely, rather than people who have been experiencing the previous future for too long.
There are a few hands up there.
Yeah. Bring up, where are the hands? Okay. Sylvain, please take a look at the hands. Just bring on the hands here. Okay. Paul Ebbing, let's bring in Paul, okay? Paul, please, shoot away.
Hello, guys. So I'm Paul Ebbing, calling in from the Netherlands, also involved as chairman in the Millennium Project. Know Gerd already for quite a bit. I think all the things that you were talking about were really interesting. and very concise in what the real bigger problems are behind it. While you were talking, and I mean you were talking a lot, and referring to the millennials and even the Z generation that we are seeing coming up now, their time span, their span of attention is lessening. So while you were doing that, and also for Chris, maybe make short snippets of core ideas, core things that you were talking about, and send that regularly. Not a 15-minute a movie, what you did now, but cut it in pieces and work a little bit around that with small conference that you only flesh out certain things. I mean, you just between a couple of sentences, you're talking about a control problem that Stuart Russell is writing a book about, or wrote a book about. That is a major topic, and just a little thing around that, and then have the discussion about it. That is one thing, and the other thing, to change the world, I think we have to start with education, high school, universities, and even in primary school, to help people to understand what is going on in the language that belongs with that age. And I'm happy to work on that. Recently, last thing that I'm saying here is that I mentored a group of the School of Humanity, young students, 16, 17, 15, 16, 17 years old. They are open for these things and they understand the impact. They really understand the impact of what's going on, but they need a voice, people like us, to back them up.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I mean, it's kind of a curse and a blessing of being a futurist. Like, I'm sure, like my colleagues like Anton and other ones can, and Bill can subjugate to this. I mean, it's basically a futurist that needs an audience, needs corporate support. You know, that's just part of the job. And by getting corporate support, you end up not reaching the people that are the next generation, who are not in the corporate world, right? So I'm sure I've reached several million people in the business world, but for this to go broader, I think we need to broaden the narrative, yeah, and it has to go outside of this idea how we can do better business, and I think that's been a real struggle for all of us in this field. And I've done this thing with Anton called The World by 2030. It's the worldby2030.com, where we have a podcast that talks about all these things about how we can do this. But yes, I totally get your idea. Now make it shorter, make it more concise, make it more manageable. I think that's part of the, the appeal for younger people to watch something that's 4 minutes or 5 minutes rather than 50 minutes.
Or 60 seconds, 60 seconds, TikTok.
Right. Okay, we got some raised hands. Let's go there. Let's go to, I think, who was first? Was it? Let's go to Craig Tilley.
And yeah. Jan is up for a while.
Yeah, I was actually last. So
okay.
Okay,
that's fine. Go first. Go in. Take it away.
Okay, great. Yeah, so my whole thing is it is all about storytelling, but on top of the storytelling, like for what I've actually been creating an artwork over the past 10 years, and it goes into 2030, and each month I create 2 new pieces. So the story, and they're created on what's happening currently. And then I made a game about it where these messengers from the future, they're warning us of what's happening and telling us that we need to change the way who we are, rather than, killing the Terminator. It's like, no, you guys need to change because you're what everyone's talking about. You're training the global brain. You're the parents of this global brain. So I've had that. That was been my thing since I've been following you, Gerd, forever. And that's where I see the storyline going into more of a thing we're doing together, because we can tell stories all day long. If they're long, we lose a crowd. If they're short, we lose a crowd. But if we say, look, we are going to go through this, and at the end of this all, we're going through this transition, and you're the ones who are going to be the ones that can do it, and they're going to talk about you for centuries, and you're going to change the future. So there's a storyline of the future telling us, so we kind of have a better relationship with them, because a lot of times, we don't change because things are too far in the past. I mean, in the future that we just don't see it. I've known that I started this 10 years ago about climate change, and I always got, oh, you still believe in that? To now, yeah, well, there's nothing we can do. So I've seen how it's shifted, but it hasn't shifted good. So if we say it's the perception, my whole MTP is, I always wondered what it was as an artist, and it's for me to see the world in new perspectives and help others do the same. So if we can do that, that's always, the Einstein, you can't solve the same problem with the same mindset, or the problem with the same mindset you had when you came in. Everybody hears that, everyone hears we need to do this, we need to do that, and there's no tool. And I think this game, I've gamified the cards that you can, which are the artworks that link together. So there's this whole thing about doing it together, and understanding that we are going to go through it. Not sugarcoating it, but saying.
Let me just add this one comment. Henry Miller has a great quote on this when he says, "The future is not about a destination; is about a new way of seeing things." Right, and Barbara Hubbard, who died last year, famous futurist, she said, "As you see the future, so you act, and as you act, so you become." Right. So those are
what
really
you focused on becomes reality. Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Greg, I think you got a good thing there. I think our series is exactly focused on that. That juxtaposition is very good, because the idea is, especially for a futurist, as a branding for Gerd or for the other futurists out there, that is your brand. The brand is that, not that you can foresee the future, but you've done enough research that you understand it, right? So that juxtaposition between 2050 or 2053 and 2023 is exactly the model that we're looking to create. I have a question for you, story-wise. Who's sending those messages back?
Yeah, that's the end of the film. Let's go to William, okay? William Kerr. I think he's been waiting patiently here for a while. Please, William, unmute, and there you are.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm talking from Toronto, Canada. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're there?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. You mentioned a few minutes ago about the fact that this is all about the youth, and that the older white guys, need to kind of pass it on. My whole view is that this future is everybody's, whether you're 92 and you're living for a day more, or 60 or 40 or 30. It's everybody's future. So this should be an intergenerational attempt, because our present is determined by our future, not our past. So if you're going to have a great meal this afternoon or tonight, your present is saying, I can't wait for the meal. It's not about, oh, I had a great meal last Saturday. It's the same thing. Our future determines our present. And if it's only 30-year-olds or 40-year-olds that are, quote, working on this, that means that everybody has to retire and have a lousy future.
Well, again, I think, the main effort that we try to do in this film is we try to figure out if we can create a positive scenario about AI and the future that balances and gives us a good story about what is possible, rather than all the things that aren't possible, or the things that are going badly, and so on. And I think AI is the first incident, the first example of how we have to use that story to create what the product actually should do. Otherwise we don't have a story, we don't really have a product. We have more raised hands. Let's go there. Let's go to Sue Snyder, please. Onto the stage with you.
I might suggest just a couple of things. One is, why don't you start piloting some programs? And let me give you a couple of examples where you might do that. I live in Maryland, right outside of DC, and our governor has just started a new program. Basically, it's a service year for kids coming right out of high school. So these individuals are going to not only be learning themselves, but they also will be out in the community working. And my thought is, that's an example of a place where you couldn't possibly, I know people involved in it, but I'm not actively at this point involved in it. But that would be a place where you could infuse ideas and see how youth engage with it and make adjustments. And the same thing, I'm working with a guy in Norway about some emerging leader programs in Europe. And that might be another place where you could infuse some of your ideas. So the first idea is around pilot, just pilot things with young adults and with older people as well. I agree with the gentleman that we all have to get involved and that youth really have to engage or it's going to go nowhere. And the second principle I would say is that use the ideas of change management. You're going to have early adopters and you're going to have people that will never change. And so really focus your attention with the people that are what we call the swing vote, the ones that will start engaging, and then you get to a tipping point where a lot of people will engage. And the third is I'm reading a very interesting book that is shifting my concepts about the next generation. And this comes out of some women in Stanford that I find very interesting. And what I would say is that, people were saying that our language, how we present things to the next generation and to ourselves too, needs to be informed by how they listen and how they absorb information. So here again, looking at some of the research that's been done and then marrying the storytelling with that might be of help. So I'll end with that.
Great idea.
Thanks very much, Sue. So, this is interesting because in the film, we also mentioned at the very end that we are looking to create what we call the Good Future Congress. And this is part of the idea of the Look Up Now kind of movement idea. They, to have a Congress that figures out a constitution, so to speak, for the good future. This is one of the things I've been talking about for 10 years, to bring in people like you're saying to contribute to that conversation. How exactly that would work, I have no idea. It's, right now it's mostly a concept. I've talked to some people in Brazil last week when I was there about doing this in Brazil. They were very excited about this, and it seems to actually fit Brazil very well as a project, given the new government from Lula, who's under a lot of pressure to take the petro money and forget about his green roots and just take the money from Petrobras and let them take out the oil. Anyway, so big story there, the Good Future Congress. Any of you have any ideas? Please feel free to chime in.
And so you've seen the stats, of course, on millennials and Gen Zs, how they view the future. Over 60% of them basically think we're doomed. So that's this rebranding the future, why it's so important, because obviously that's unsustainable. I mean, they have a built-in cynicism and skepticism about any content, which is why you really need, as Gerd's been saying, Good Future Congress, big movement, that reverses that.
And that's where even partnering with people that are working on that issue. There is a group down in Roanoke, Virginia, for instance, that's working on mental health issues around drug addiction. And they are having a month of September of hope. And so here again, how do you take some pilot ideas and marry it with people that are actually working on issues, looking for ways to give people hope? So just, again, it's the idea of where are some pilot projects that could be married with things that already exist.
Yeah.
Good stuff. We've had a raised hand for a while. John Meager. John, if you're still there, I see you moving, so you must still be there. If you could chime in.
Hi. First off, I thought the movie was pretty fantastic in showing the positives, the negatives. The issue that I have is, when I've seen, and I've spent hours in looking at interviews with the Eliza Yudkowsky, Max Tegmark, Sam Harris, the philosopher and neuroscientist, and there's quite a large group of people in the know that do not think that a super AI or even an AGI that is equivalent to humans, that it can be controlled. And even in your film, you mentioned that pretty quickly, we could have an intelligence that is 1,000,000 times or more. And you put a figure of 2050. Many would say that the pace that we're moving, it's going to come even sooner than that. And so the question that I have is, or the contribution is, all the good things that you mentioned, Gerd and Chris, in terms of climate, cancer, energy, even the financial markets, all that could be achieved, in my opinion, with narrow AI and not AGI or super AI. And I don't know, when I see comments from experts in the field that have been trying to align AI with human interest, and they say that it cannot be done. I wonder.
Yeah, John,
if,
let me chime in there, because just the other day, Jeffrey Hinton, the guy who used to work for Google.
oh yes,
The grandfather of deep learning, really,
Yep.
who did all the initial invention of backpropagation and all that stuff. He said the other day, the solution to this problem might be not to pursue AGI by itself, but to keep AI in a range of where it needs humans.
yes,
Which means, sort of narrowed all the way to mid-level AI. And I think that's a good approach, is to say, I personally get scared when I hear Sam Altman from OpenAI talking about how the goal of the entire company is to invent an artificial general intelligence.
yes.
To which I'm saying, why do we need it? I mean, and
Exactly.
why do we want it? Right?
If we can achieve everything, but that would also require international cooperation on where is the area that we do not exceed. And I thought in your film you mentioned certain things that we could invent that we've not invented, that we've not gone that far. That may be a cautious approach, especially if the collaboration and alignment, even among human beings right now,
Yeah, well, here's what I think will happen here. Unfortunately, I think we're going to see a major issue with the increased intelligent systems that we have. For example, a stock market disaster, where the stock market has to be shut down because AI is all over it. And that could cause huge economic as well as personal damage, as well as dead people, of course, as well, if it was, for example, the airline traffic control and things like that. But it's very likely to be the stock market. As the SEC chair, Gary Geller, I think it's his name, said the other day, he said, what is likely to happen with AI is that more banking systems will use AI, and then we'll have these black boxes and nobody knows what's right? And that may cause us to be more cautious and to go back to, which unfortunately, that's what humans do, right? We had the nuclear bomb and then we had the treaties.
But I think that's a great storyline too. I mean, that's what we're talking about with Protopia. So you've actually created a great conflict area, right? The middle of the story is dystopia, where, as Gerd said, could bring down the stock market, could affect air traffic. But the Protopia was, we made the right decision. So it's still a great story, right? And it turns out okay, right? It doesn't have to have the machines taking over our bodies, but that's kind of what we're talking about. How do we structure stuff so people can get what you just said, John, but get it into a storyline? And even what Gerd just said, he was giving a storyline. I think that's what we're missing now. We've got a lot of these, YouTube videos where people are just downloading us with facts and kind of theories and philosophies. We need more stories.
Let's interject for a second. I think Bill is still there, Bill Halal. Bill wrote a great book about the idea of going from knowledge, going beyond knowledge. And this is part of that process. Bill, can you comment quickly about your book and why that's so? And then we're going to go to Jan. He's been patiently waiting.
Well, I want to comment about the existential threat. I'm hearing backlash to that idea, and I think it's needed, because I think they're overstating the dangers. I have an article that I just published called "Is the Singularity the Next Big Y2K?" This reminds me very much of the Y2K crisis, if you remember, 23 years ago, when everybody thought the world was going to die, we were all going to collapse, and nothing happened. And I think we may be overstating the threats of AI.
I completely agree with you, Bill. I want to say that because you're right. And that's where stories come in. Stories are balanced, right? It's like, that's what you have, kind of a doomsday crush, which I think Gerd did a good job of kind of modulating that.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happens, where you can see, oh, there's this alternative, there's that alternative. Could go this direction, we could go that direction. You're right. It's all very
unfortunately
kind of a one swim lane.
I think it's a little bit confusing in that we're both understating and overstating, depending on which part of the story we're talking about. And that is the hard thing about AI. You know, it's that those cases actually both exist, right? And you know, the thing that's gonna makes it hard to understand is that in some cases it will be total disaster, in other cases it will be total nirvana. And now we have to figure out, you know, how do we keep them together without making a general decision on everything? You know, I mean, if it can, if AI can increase our GDP by 2 or 3x, which is modest expectation, and if we are able to turn that money around into collective benefit, we're going to solve a lot of problems. Right? If, as a result, we become a computer-controlled society, that would not be so good. Yeah, so, you know, this is one of those things. Let's bring in Jan. She's been patiently waiting. Jan Hurwitz. And so you're there, Jan?
Yes, thank you, Gerd. I'm Jan Hurwitz with the Visionary Ethics Foundation in Costa Rica. And we have been teaching the future for 20 years, mostly to human rights defenders in Latin America and the Caribbean, and also environmentalists, people who at the local level are trying to make a difference, are trying to change. The past 5 years, we've been working virtually, and we have been using your Good Future film, Gerd, and we like it. As a matter of fact, this is a good moment to say that this new film is fantastic.
It is.
Yes, in content, I agree with everything, and I like your approach, and I think culturally it will work with the people we're working with in Latin America and the Caribbean, but also it's visually a work of art. And as a student of neuroscience, I saw all kinds of lights going on in my mind. So I wanted to say that as we move forward, there are 2 areas that I would like to stress. One is something that we've been working on as we look at the horizon and visualize the future with our students. We also do some inner work so that we feel more resilient and more able to navigate the uncertain future. So it's a back and forth between the outer perception of what's going on, the interpretation, and the inner strength. The other thing I wanted to mention is that as we work with people at the local level, in local government and NGOs, university professors, we're in 11 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, and have this year 18 future laboratories being set up. And we're going to have a meeting in January to present all of those and hopefully do something that will contribute to the UN meeting on the future in September. We'll see how that goes. But it is very important as we look at the needs globally, and that we do need the new commission and we do need the United Nations and all of that, you know, we're working through the Millennium Project on, but we also need to mobilize at the local level. So that is where we come in. Yeah.
Thanks for the reminder. I think, you know, what is happening, and it certainly has been in my work, that all the work on the outside and the technology, which is outside for the most part, has made me look more at who I am, you know, as a person on the inside, and also cherish much more about what I do with that, you know, so that's music, nature, contemplation. You know, I think that's probably what happens to a lot of people. You know, it's that it leads us back to deciding how can we be creative, how can we be resilient. And the main thing I've learned from working with many companies, I discussed with Anton the other day as we were preparing for our show, is that, after having done future work for 20 years and he did for 35 years, there's certain things that you learn. For example, in the end, it's all about your mindset and your attitude and
Right.
your personality and your character and how you look at the world. I think
Right,
Barbara
so the
Hubbard again said,
gentleman- The
our
gentleman
mindset
who-
contains
who-
our future. right?
Exactly, and the gentleman who said, do we really need AGI, I think is going in the right direction, because that's what we're saying here, how far what is progress? What is poverty? And what really do we need to be truly human and to be I don't need an AI assistant to be happy.
That's true.
Yeah, well, maybe
But I
make
do
it-
need
make it-
to I do need to read the Tao Te King, and I do need to do some other things. And that's sort of going back and looking at what we've inherited from the past. And here in Latin America with the indigenous, the original populations, we learn a lot from them. And so that should be woven in too with what we do.
Well, yeah, what
Costa Rica
you're
does some.
doing, it sounds very, very cool. Like, so a lot of my work is in content. My biggest clients are Google and Disney. I have a big conference in a week with the USAA, which is like the 4th largest insurance company in the United States. One of the things that's really interesting, and I think Gerd and Anton touched on it in one of their discussions, is that in this age of AI, the flip side of it is that human agency and human value is even more important. And Gerd talks about this too, technology and humanity. And one thing that our companies aren't doing enough of is really building up the idea of what is human agency in the age of AI? What is human value in the age of AI? Because it's changing, because it's more vertical thinking, less horizontal. But I don't know if companies are really concentrating on building up that human vertical agency, intuition, creativity, imagination, community, all that stuff, as much as I think to what people are talking about here, 98% of what they're spending is on how to bring AI into the company.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well-
let's have Anton.
Not to how.
Let's have Anton chime in here for a second, because we discussed this a lot in one of our shows. One of
Yeah,
my
you did. You
major
had a good
fears.
discussion.
Yeah. One of my major fears is that companies will use AI as a way of removing the human component because it's too expensive.
Yeah.
And to cut down to the bottom of things and just make it work in some way that's like half-assed, but it still works. But we don't have to pay humans. We don't have unions. We don't have opinions. They'll replace a scriptwriter with a robot because the show would be just as bad as before, and things like that, right? So and that's one of my major fears as I talk to lots of corporates, and I think Anton can tell a story about that as well, is that the primary way of looking at the bottom line to get rid of as many people as possible using technology, I think that's a very bad approach.
One question I do have, excuse me, has to do with subtitles in other languages. Is that being contemplated? Because to get the word out, we need subtitles. Yeah.
The film is actually fully subtitled with captions on YouTube in Spanish and Portuguese. So if you go to YouTube, you just hit the caption button, and it brings up the Portuguese and the Spanish versions. They're already in there. So Anton.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks, good. I was going to make the point, and you and I, we so aligned. You kind of knew that I wanted to make the point, which is quite interesting. We all talk about this technology as though it's an either or, and I think the answer is it's an and. And as I've said a few times, the fourth industrial revolution is capturing everyone's debate, and it's all about the robots and AI, whether it's general or narrow, it doesn't really matter. It's about the AI. The fifth industrial revolution needs to be about rehumanizing humans in a world where AI and robots and automation and RPA all coexist. The issue for business is, and it's a very important issue, because there needs to be a new social contract between business and society and talent to redefine what creates value. Society needs to understand what is valuable, and the social contract between government, labor, and society also needs to shift, because that old contract from the sort of post-Second World War industrial era, that's all changed. So we're in this sort of melting pot of conflicting, challenging ideas, and it really needs humans to come together to say, what is the future we choose? How do we redefine the contract between business and labor? What's the new state versus society versus labor contract? I mean, it's fascinating for me, you know, talk about rehumanizing humans. More and more of the 4-day week experiment results are now coming through. And the vast majority of outcomes is increasingly positive. People are happier, people are less anxious, and guess what? Productivity and profit goes up. Now, that's totally counterintuitive, but it's choosing a different future, getting everyone excited and getting everyone aligned around that ambition for a different future and then pursuing it. So I think we're living in one of the most interesting periods ever right now. I mean, it's great.
I mean, we had a show on this, and if you want to see the show, by the way, it's the world by 2030.com. That's where our show is. We talked about this. I think in many ways, it's like 1968 now. You know, the old world is crumbling, the new world isn't here. Yeah. so we're kind of like, you know, this old capitalism, the old way that the oil industry, the fossil fuel, that's all crumbling, but the new thing isn't here. So now we're like really struggling to put it all together. And okay, we got one more raised hand here.
Good on renewable energy. Everyone says renewable energy by 2050. If you do the maths, we don't have enough raw materials, minerals, actually to create all the turbines and the solar panels we need. So it's not either or, it's a combination. And how we create that mix is the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I watched a talk by Al Gore yesterday. You got to watch this one. It's a counterpoint, the TED thing that they're doing. And he gave a riveting talk yesterday or a couple of days ago. It's on YouTube about how the oil industry is playing both sides of the past and the future. Right? And this is a great example of what's happening, right? So in the end, you know, nothing is going to come from them to actually get us to that new future. And it just kind of makes it look different. But you got to watch the talk to understand the context. Let's bring in Donna. We had a raised hand here for a while. Donna Williams. Yeah, please go.
Hi, can you hear me? All right,
Yeah.
hang on. Tell me, I'm mute myself. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Gerd, Chris, I just wanted to congratulate you on a job very well done, and it's a gift to the world. So thank you for doing that. And I, you know, at this stage of coming into the conversation, so many astute things have been said. I just wanted to echo that I do think my spot in this conversation is trying to get my profession, lawyers, actually more agile with technology in general, and then also with AI in particular. And it's a real balance between, for lack of a better word, the desire to create, to generate business / greed, depending upon the individual / just keeping your head above water if you're a solo practitioner, versus the time and energy to learn something new. And the thing about AI and Gen AI in particular is that we've just been bombarded over the last year with so much information. Gerd, you said in the Chris, you said in the at the end of your video, I think very astutely, the millions of articles that have been written in 2023 alone. It's overwhelming. And it's so overwhelming that it actually causes everyone to freeze and just hope, keep their fingers crossed that actually they're going to get through this themselves and also get through this, you know, with basically some normalcy intact. So,
thank you.
All I can say is thank you. I think the conversation's beginning. I put my information down below if anybody wants to have further conversations around this. I welcome them. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Donna. We have another 5 minutes. So I want to say one thing, and then I think we can take one or more people, 2 more people, if there's any more raised hands. I want to thank everybody in the network for making this happen. We worked very hard for half a year. I want to thank Chris for his dedicated work as a director and, you know, putting up with my, you know, bad habits while recording and everything. So that's pretty great. Sylvain Collet, who is the editor, is on the call as well, but can't be seen right now. and who worked day and night for the last 3 months pretty much to get this film out. And we have plans for this film to become a series. The next show we want to do, if there's anybody out there who would want to develop it, is the future of artificial intelligence and the creative industry. So we want to talk about what's happening in Hollywood with the script writers, with musicians, with artists, with people who are creating things, and now machines are, parenthesis, creating things, copying things, simulating things. What does that mean for our future? And we want to do an episode on this. And so if anybody's interested in helping us with that, and we have about 10 episodes coming up, and just go to the website, lookupnow.tv, to find out what's happening next and what we're up to. And please do spread the word as far as you can, so we can get millions of people to watch this. And it will be available on Vimeo as well for downloading in a few weeks. And like I said, the language versions are now English and Spanish, and English subtitles that you can use on YouTube. But we'll do a burned subtitle version as well, where it's going to be there the whole time for downloading. That's really important. Any more finishing
We were
comments?
talking about large organizations too, like we were talking, we were hearing about some of these groups that we can kind of merge with. We're open to that too. I mean, if someone has a large company that wants to learn about some of this stuff, and we can kick off the, technology versus human concept with them, what I think would be terrific. Human values, human agency, great part of this. Great discussion.
Yeah, maybe I'll mention. Yeah, who's there? Yeah,
I
please.
was just going to say, if you have time for just one more quick comment, I think the trend that I hear Anton and Chris mentioning about it reinventing what it means to be human, I think that's built into the technology, because the main impact of AI is to eliminate knowledge work, the work that we do. So it frees human attention to move up into the realm of consciousness and creativity. So I think it's built right into the technology. We just have to harness it. We have to be aware that this is what's happening, and shape consciousness and shape organizations so that we can harness creativity and human welfare. It's a human choice. We've got to understand this and do it.
That's a huge area, and we could, that's a whole nother Zoom, because that's something that, I mean, Anton, you work with a lot of companies like I do. They want the HR departments, the executive coaches, all those people are all into that stuff. I don't know if they know how to put it together within the organization at this point in time, because they've got this hybrid thing going, like Anton talks about, 4-day work weeks, people coming back to work, right? And what we're finding is that, as Gerd talks about, what's called synthetic cultures.
Oh.
So what happens when people stay home more? Give an example. I have a friend that's a big agent. When the agents go to talk to actors now, they don't call, they DM, they email, they text. They haven't talked to the actor in 2 years. And the agent that is part of our generation says, have you called them? Bill, they're afraid to call. It's called phone phobia. 70% of Gen Zers and millennials don't like using analog, don't like using the phone. Texts are easier. So this area you're talking about is, how do you bridge all this digital and human and get the best of both worlds, right? Because what the opposite, like the other side is, people want community and connection.
Yeah.
But I think, Chris,
that's
beyond that.
Yeah, let's bring in Anton, then we have to wrap. Anton, please.
It goes way beyond that. It also enters the realm of what is valuable. And of course, that goes into the heart of what is capitalism all about, and how do we measure corporate success? How does Wall Street regard you when you're successful corporate? So, is helping an old lady cross the street safely valuable? Of course it is. The state saves on medical costs, but that help is not recognized and monetized in the hands of the young person that performed the act. So how do we monetize humanness and goodness in a new economic capitalist system where we still reward entrepreneurship, capital, and risk? So it's a glorious debate to have, but it's one that needs.
But Anton, from where we are, and you're terrific at this, and so is Gerd, how do we make that into a story versus a debate?
Precisely. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
How do we transform all of this into a story? So now we have a third film.
Okay.
Oh,
We gotta-
one of my
Hang on
hottest
just one
topics today that I speak on is the democratic enterprise. I think we're moving towards exactly that.
Yeah.
Corporate 90% of corporations now practice ESG. They get a lot of backlash, but they're intent on doing it because they know they have to. I
Well,
think it's
ESG is a hoax. I mean, ESG is a hoax. It's
no,
just
it's
guys,
not. No, it's not. No, they take it
let's-
seriously. That's
We
another
gotta wrap it
topic.
here.
That's another discussion.
it's a
I wanna
consultant thing for just selling more of what we've been doing for donkey's years.
I
Anyway.
think that's too cynical. Too cynical.
Okay,
That's-
let's get
Okay.
Marta to
All
come
right,
in for
we
a
ended
second.
with a bang.
Marta Sotomayor had raised her hand. Let's bring you in at the end here because a bunch of guys talking. Let's bring in somebody else a little bit different. So Marta, please.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. And once again, congratulations for an amazing job. I'm a fan. Just dropping 2 or 3 key words that I think are massively important from my perspective. I work in Portugal, in the education sector, but also in the corporate world. And my field of expertise is hospitality. And when we are talking about humanization and humanize more, I think this is the field. And we were talking about, you know, going into Hollywood and how much the holograms are doing their job. I think in the hospitality sector, more and more, we should be positioning ourselves. And I think what you do, Gerd, and this content is very useful to me when I go to corporations and specify how valuable it is to gesture, to not to help the old lady to cross the street, but to be kind and human and really have I think will be ultimately the fields in terms of business to do the opposite and be really the moment where people will get out of the internet to the real world and have some, you know, kind moments. I also would like to emphasize that all these questions that you were just having, for me, it comes within 2 words, ethics and education. I think what we are trying to discuss and achieve and pretty much look into, I think if we forget what are ethics, what is ethics, and I don't know if this should be brought back to discussion, but again, go to education. And I have lots of doubts on the academic world as it is right now regarding all these subjects. I think we're in the future with Gerd. You're the futuristic in the house and the optimistic. And I don't know how we will push that because I think we are pretty alone. This is my insights. And thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. Thanks, Marta. Portugal is one of my favorite countries in the world to go to and speak. For some reason, my book is very popular in Portugal. And it seems like a good match there. But now we're really going to wrap things up, okay? So please keep track of everything. My newsletter is at gerd.digital. You can sign up for that. Chris Sean Nolan, not Chris Nolan, you know, the Oppenheimer guy. He's much better than this guy. But anyway, Chris, where can people find out more about you and your work?
Well, we have 90,000 feet is the company, but you can email me at nolanfilms@gmail.com. I'd like to talk about this and how do we take branding the future forward, rebranding the future, I should say, and create more stories for each one of these topics. How do we create more stories, these things that you're interested in? How do we, as Bill talked about, how do we bring more consciousness, but into story instead of just, you know, all the usual kind of like facts. You know,
okay. We're gonna have a contact form on our website, lookupnow.tv, and please everybody spread the word. And thanks very much for showing up. This was an interesting conversation. We've gone back to Zoom as seems like the most feasible way of doing these things. And thanks very much. Live long and prosper.
Thanks, Chris. Bye bye.
All right, guys. See you around.
Thank you, guys.
Okay,
Bye.
thank you.
Cheers,
Bye.
guys.